There's a question I love to ask people. What do you do every single day that you know is moving you forward? And the room usually goes quiet. You see, we live in a culture obsessed with breakthroughs. We celebrate the big moments, the viral successes, the before and after transformations. But here's the truth: success doesn't come from what you do occasionally. It comes from what you do consistently. Let me tell you a story. A friend of mine wanted to get in shape. He hired a trainer, changed his diet, and committed to daily workouts. After the first week, he looked in the mirror, nothing had changed. Second week, same thing. By the third week, he started to question, is this even working? But here's the thing, he kept going. 3 months later, the results were obvious. Not just in the mirror, but in how he walked into a room, in how he spoke, in how he showed up for his life. It wasn't the one workout that changed him. It was the decision to show up again and again, even when it didn't feel like it was working. That's the power of consistent action. We often think motivation is what we need to start something. But consistency isn't about motivation. It's about discipline. It's about belief. In a world that celebrates dramatic wins and overnight success, it's easy to believe that massive, intense efforts are the key to achievement. We love stories of people who sprinted their way to success, who pulled all-nighters, took giant leaps in Chayawans. But when you strip away the highlight reel and look closely at how meaningful success is built, whether in relationships, health, leadership, or personal growth, one truth quietly stands above all: consistency beats intensity. Intensity is exciting, it's emotional, it's fueled by adrenaline, motivation, or even desperation. But intensity is also fleeting. It's what we feel when we make a New Year's resolution, join a gym, start a new project, or get a surge of inspiration after reading a book or hearing a speech. And while intense action can create momentum, it rarely sustains change. That's because life doesn't reward what you do once in a while. Life rewards what you do day after day. Consistency, on the other hand, is subtle. It's not dramatic or loud. It doesn't grab attention. It's built in the quiet moments when no one is watching. It's what happens when you choose to get up early and write even when you're tired, when you go for a run even when you don't feel like it, when you lead your team with integrity, even when shortcuts seem easier. Consistency isn't about how much you can do in a single burst of effort. It's about how long you can keep showing up. Think about how a tree grows. You don't plant a seed, water it once, and expect a towering oak. Growth is invisible for a long time. It happens underground before it ever appears on the surface. The roots take hold slowly and steadily until one day something breaks through the soil. That's how real progress works, incrementally, through repetition and over time. Intensity often feels more satisfying because it creates a quick sense of accomplishment. You feel like you've done something important, but that satisfaction is temporary. It fades. And when it does, if you haven't built the habit of consistency, you're left with a void. You need another burst of motivation, another shot of inspiration. You become dependent on moments of high energy, rather than building systems and disciplines that operate regardless of how you feel. The people who succeed in the long term, whether in business, fitness, art, or life, aren't the ones who had the biggest bursts of inspiration. They're the ones who created habits. They did the work when it was exciting, and they did the work when it was boring. They kept going not because every day felt like a breakthrough, but because they understood that the breakthrough was coming slowly, surely, and only if they didn't stop. There's a difference between doing something and becoming someone. Intensity can help you do something once. Consistency transforms your identity. When you write every day, you become a writer. When you lead every day, you become a leader. When you practice kindness, discipline, or courage consistently, those qualities stop being actions, they become who you are. In the end, it's not what you do when you're inspired that defines your future. It's what you do when you're not. That's the true power of consistency. It's not flashy. It doesn't need applause. But it works every single time. One of the most frustrating parts of growth is not seeing it. You put in the work day after day, and nothing seems to change. You go to the gym, and the mirror looks the same. You write every morning, but the words still feel clumsy. You practice patience, but the stress still gets to you. It's in these moments when effort doesn't meet obvious reward that most people quit. But here's the reality: results are invisible until they're not. Progress often hides. It's not linear, not immediate, and rarely dramatic. And that makes it uncomfortable. We're wired to seek feedback. We want validation, signals that we're on the right path. When we don't get those signs quickly, it feels like failure. But just because you can't see the impact doesn't mean it's not happening. In fact, the most important changes happen beneath the surface. Consider how water shapes rock. It doesn't happen in a single wave. It happens over time, drop by drop, quietly and persistently. The rock doesn't know which drop will leave a visible mark. But eventually it does. The same principle applies to personal growth, skill building, leadership, and transformation. You don't know which workout will change your body, which conversation will build trust, or which quiet decision will alter the course of your life. But that moment will come if you keep going. There's a moment in every process when something clicks. The writer suddenly finds their voice. The leader begins to inspire without trying. The student begins to understand the material with ease. That shift feels sudden from the outside, but it was earned in silence. It was built during the days when nothing seemed to work. Those invisible days matter more than we realize. They're where resilience is developed, where habits are forged, where identity is shaped. The reason we struggle with this concept is that we expect results to be constant and measurable. But growth doesn't follow a straight line. It's exponential. At first, progress is so slow that it feels like nothing. But if you stay consistent, something compounds. You hit a tipping point, and suddenly everything looks different. Others call it luck or natural talent. You know better. You were there for the days when no one clapped. You were there when the only reward was the act of showing up. This is why patience is such a critical part of success. Not passive waiting, but active patience, the kind that shows up every day with full effort, even when the scoreboard reads 0. That's not foolishness, that's faith. Faith in the process. Faith in the idea that effort multiplied by time will eventually yield results. And it does. Eventually your body changes, your writing improves, your leadership becomes magnetic, your confidence grows. But by the time the results become visible, they're no longer the most important part. What matters more is who you became while waiting. The discipline, the strength, the quiet belief in yourself, that's the real reward. The visible result is just the confirmation. So if you're doing the work and it feels like nothing is changing, keep going. You are not failing. You are not wasting your time. You are simply in the phase of invisible progress. And one day, without warning, everything will look different. Not because it happened overnight, but because you refused to quit when no one could see it happening. And that is what separates those who succeed from those who almost did. Motivation feels good. It's a rush of inspiration, a spark that makes everything seem possible. It's what gets you started the first day at the gym, the first page of a book, the launch of a new project. When motivation is high, effort feels effortless. You don't have to convince yourself to act because you want to act. But as powerful as motivation is, it's also unreliable. It comes and goes. It rises and falls with your mood, your environment, your energy levels. And if motivation is the only thing driving you, you'll stop the moment it fades. That's why discipline matters more. Because discipline is what shows up when motivation doesn't. Discipline is the quiet force that keeps you going after the excitement wears off. It's what wakes you up early when you'd rather sleep in. It's what gets you to open your laptop when you're tired, to keep your commitments when they're no longer convenient. Discipline isn't driven by how you feel in the moment, it's driven by a decision you made before the feelings ever came. The problem with relying on motivation is that it puts your progress at the mercy of your emotions. And emotions are unpredictable. You can't control when you feel inspired. You can't schedule motivation. But you can choose discipline. You can decide in advance the kind of person you want to be and then act in alignment with that decision whether you feel like it or not. That's the difference between amateurs and professionals. Amateurs work when it's easy. Professionals work regardless. It's not because they're superhuman. It's because they've built the habit of discipline. They've trained themselves to take action even when their motivation is low because they understand that consistency matters more than intensity. Think of an athlete training for the Olympics. They don't get to skip a session just because they're not feeling it that day. They train according to a plan, not according to their mood. That's how they get results, by committing to a process, by showing up again and again, even when it's boring, even when it's hard. It's the same in any area of life. Whether you're trying to build a business, raise a family, write a book, or change your habits, discipline will take you further than motivation ever will. What's powerful about discipline is that it eventually builds momentum. At first, it's hard. You have to push yourself. You have to say no to comfort, to distractions, to excuses. But over time, discipline becomes identity. It stops being something you have to force and starts being who you are. The more you act with discipline, the more you see yourself as someone who follows through. And that belief fuels even greater consistency. People often say they lack motivation, but what they really lack is structure. They wait to feel ready when in reality, readiness is a result of action, not a prerequisite. The best way to build motivation is to start doing the thing you don't feel like doing. Action creates clarity. Action creates energy. And the more you act, the easier it becomes. This is why discipline should be your foundation. Motivation can join you on the journey, and when it does, it's a gift. But when it disappears, as it inevitably will, discipline keeps you moving forward. It doesn't care how you feel. It only cares what you do. So stop chasing motivation. Start building discipline. Set your intentions. Make a plan. Keep your word to yourself. Do the hard things not because you feel like it, but because they matter. That's how change happens, not in the moments of excitement, but in the moments of quiet resolve. Who you are is not defined by what you say you want, but by what you consistently do. Every action you take, especially the ones you repeat, becomes a small vote for the type of person you are becoming. Over time, those repeated actions form patterns, and those patterns shape your identity. This is why consistency is so powerful, not just because it produces results, but because it builds the foundation of who you believe you are. Most people think identity is something you discover. But in reality, identity is something you build action by action, choice by choice. If you write every day, eventually you start to believe, I'm a writer. If you show up to train even when you're tired, you begin to think, I'm disciplined. If you lead with integrity, time after time, you internalize, I'm a leader who does the right thing. The actions come first. The identity follows. This is important because most of us try to change from the outside in. We set goals based on outcomes, lose 10 pounds, get the promotion, save more money. But goals are about what you want. Identity is about who you are. If you don't shift how you see yourself, any progress you make will feel temporary. You might hit the goal, but without reinforcing it through consistent action, you'll likely slide back into old habits. That's why people who lose weight quickly often gain it back, because they change their behavior temporarily, but not their self-perception permanently. Consistency, on the other hand, doesn't just help you reach the goal. It changes your sense of self. The moment you say, I'm someone who always finishes what I start, and you prove it through repeated action, that belief takes root. It becomes a core part of your identity, and that identity begins to guide future decisions automatically. You no longer have to force yourself into action. You simply act in alignment with who you are. What's powerful is that this process works in both directions. Positive habits repeated consistently build a strong, confident identity, but negative patterns can do the opposite. Skip the gym often enough and to leave. I'm just not the kind of person who works out. Procrastinate your goals. And you internalize, I can't follow through. The more you act in a certain way, the more those actions reinforce a belief, even if it's not true. That's why changing behavior starts with changing the small, repeated decisions that shape your sense of self. The good news is you don't have to overhaul your life to change your identity. You just need to start showing up in small ways, consistently. If you want to become someone who reads more, read a few pages every day. If you want to be a better communicator, practice daily even if it's uncomfortable. These small acts might not look like much at first, but they send a message to yourself, this is who I am now. And that message, repeated over time, becomes your truth. Eventually, your consistency becomes your character. You become someone who can be counted on by others, and more importantly, by yourself. That self-trust is one of the most valuable things you can build. It means you don't need external motivation. You don't need constant reminders or rewards. You just act because that's who you are. So if you want to change your life, start with what you do consistently. The outcome will take care of itself. But more than that, you'll look in the mirror and see someone new, not because of a single big achievement, but because of all the small, quiet victories that built a new identity from the inside out. The most meaningful change, the deepest growth, and the greatest impact often happen in moments no one else sees. It's not the big speeches, the public wins, or the milestones that define you. It's the quiet decisions made in solitude, the small acts of courage no one applauds, and the effort you give when there's no spotlight. Real impact happens in the unseen moments. We live in a world that celebrates visibility. Social media performance reviews, awards, and praise all point to the idea that if something doesn't get noticed, then there's something done. But the truth is, the work that matters most, the kind that shapes your character, deepens your integrity, and builds lasting influence, is rarely glamorous or seen. It happens when you choose patience over anger, discipline over comfort, and honesty over convenience, especially when no one is watching. Think about a great leader. We usually remember the big moments, the keynote speeches, the big wins, the moments of recognition. But what really made them great were the choices they made behind the scenes, the hours spent listening, mentoring, reflecting. The quiet times they stayed up late thinking about how to better serve their team. The difficult conversations they had, not for praise, but because it was the right thing to do. The consistency with which they lived their values when it was easier not to. It's in these moments when there's no audience and no applause that your values are tested and strengthened. Anyone can do the right thing when everyone is watching. It takes courage to do the right thing when no one is. That's where real integrity lies. That's where true impact is born. This principle applies to everything: relationships, careers, habits, leadership. A strong marriage isn't built on the wedding day or the anniversary trips. It's built in the daily choice to listen, to forgive, to be kind in the middle of stress. A meaningful career isn't made in promotions or titles. It's made in the hours you invest when it's hard, the focus you give to your craft, and the way you treat people when there's no reward in it. Real fitness isn't built by a few intense workouts. It's built in the mornings you show up tired, the meals you choose with discipline, the consistency you build over time. We often underestimate these moments because they're ordinary, but ordinary does not mean insignificant. A small act of kindness, a moment of resilience, a quiet decision to keep going, these are the moments that accumulate and become something extraordinary. They might not get you attention, but they will earn you respect, especially your own. What's more, these unseen moments are often where the foundation is laid for everything else. You cannot fake long-term excellence. You cannot sustain impact on the outside if there's no strength on the inside. And strength on the inside is built when no one is around to validate it. When you commit to doing the right thing, regardless of recognition, you develop something rare: quiet confidence. Not arrogance, not pride, but a deep, grounded belief in who you are. Because you've done the work. You've faced yourself. You've built your character in the dark so that when the lights come on, you don't have to pretend. So if you're in a season where your work feels invisible, where your effort isn't being noticed, don't be discouraged. That doesn't mean it's not making a difference. Some of the most powerful moments of growth happen in silence. Some of the most lasting impact comes from things no one ever knows you did. Keep showing up, keep choosing integrity, keep doing the work that matters even if no one sees it. Because that's where the real impact happens. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. Not in the applause, but in the quiet. And not for the recognition, but for the person you're becoming.